Elvis faced down a drunk heckler who called him fake. What happened next left 20,000 people speechless. November 14th, 1976, at the Las Vegas Hilton started like any other Elvis concert. 20,000 excited fans packed the arena, ready to see the king of rock and roll deliver another unforgettable show. Elvis was in top form that night, his energy electric as he moved through his set list. He had just finished a powerful version of Burning Love and was starting Hound Dog when everything changed in an instant. A loud, slurred voice cut through the music like a sharp knife.
"Elvis, you ain't nothing but a fake."
The voice belonged to Bobby Big Mike Henderson, a 35-year-old construction worker from Phoenix. Mike had been drinking at the hotel bar since noon, and he wasn't at the show because he was a fan. He came with one purpose: to prove that Elvis was nothing more than a soft, pretty boy who had never faced real trouble. Mike wasn't your typical concert goer. He was the kind of person who started fights at sports games and believed famous people needed to be knocked down a few pegs. In his alcohol-clouded mind, he had convinced himself that Elvis Presley was fake, and he was going to expose him in front of thousands of people. "You hear me, Presley? You're a phony!" Mike shouted again, this time even louder. Elvis stopped singing right in the middle of the verse. The band, confused and unsure what to do, slowly stopped playing their instruments. 20,000 people turned to stare at this drunk man standing in his seat, swaying back and forth, pointing his finger aggressively at the stage. Elvis's first reaction was exactly what you would expect from a professional performer. He tried to handle the situation with his famous Southern charm and humor, hoping to redirect everyone's attention back to the music. "Well, hello there, friend," Elvis said into his microphone, his voice carrying that warm, familiar tone his fans loved. "Looks like we got ourselves a music critic in the house tonight." The audience laughed, expecting this gentle response to end the disruption. Most hecklers, when acknowledged by the star on stage, either sit down feeling embarrassed or get removed by security guards. But Big Mike wasn't like most hecklers. He was drunk, angry, and determined to cause trouble. "Don't you friend me, boy!" Mike yelled back, his voice echoing through the silent arena. "I'm talking to you. You think you're so tough with your fancy clothes and your singing? Why don't you come down here and prove you're a real man?" The atmosphere in the room changed completely. This wasn't just some drunk person making noise anymore. This was a direct challenge, and everyone in the arena could feel the tension building. Other audience members started shifting uncomfortably in their seats. Some people began booing Mike, while others shouted for security to throw him out. Elvis stood at the microphone, studying this intoxicated man who was now disrupting the entire show. Security guards were already moving toward Mike's section, ready to escort him out, but Elvis held up his hand to stop them. "Sir," Elvis said, his voice still calm but with a slight edge to it, "you paid good money to be here tonight, just like everyone else. How about we all just enjoy the music?" But Mike wasn't finished. "I don't want to enjoy your music," he yelled back. "I want to see if you're anything more than a mama's boy who shakes his hips for teenage girls." That last comment hit Elvis hard. Everyone in the arena could see it. His jaw tightened, and for a moment the famous Elvis smile disappeared completely. The crowd was getting more restless by the second. The joyful, celebratory energy that had filled the room just minutes earlier was now tense and ugly. What happened next surprised everyone in the arena, including Elvis's own band members and crew. Instead of signaling for security to remove the troublemaker, instead of trying to ignore him and continue with the show, Elvis set down his microphone and started walking toward the edge of the stage. "You want to know if I'm a real man?" Elvis said, his voice now carrying clearly through the arena's sound system. "You think I'm just some pretty boy who can't handle himself?" The arena went completely silent. 20,000 people held their breath, not knowing what they were about to see. Elvis looked directly at Big Mike and said, "Well, friend, I tell you what. Why don't you come up here and we'll settle this like gentlemen?" The audience exploded. Some people were cheering loudly, while others were shouting, "Don't do it, Elvis!" Security guards were frantically trying to figure out what to do next. Elvis's manager, Colonel Parker, was reportedly having a panic attack backstage, but Elvis wasn't finished. "Come on up here," Elvis repeated, gesturing toward the stage. "You want to prove something?" "Let's prove it. But I'll tell you what. We're not going to fight like wild animals. We're going to settle this the way real men settle things. Big Mike, encouraged by the alcohol and all the attention he was getting, started pushing his way through the crowd toward the stage. "Damn right we are!" he shouted. Security tried to stop him, but Elvis waved them away. "Let him come," Elvis said firmly. "Let him come up here." When Big Mike finally reached the stage, stumbling slightly as he climbed up, the entire arena was in complete chaos. People were on their feet, some screaming, others trying to get closer to see what was going to happen next. Nobody knew if they were about to witness a fight between Elvis Presley and a drunk construction worker. Elvis walked over to where Mike was standing, and for a tense moment, the two men faced each other. Elvis stood calm and controlled in his iconic white jumpsuit, while Big Mike was sweaty, swaying, clearly drunk, but still aggressive and ready for a fight. "All right, friend," Elvis said, close enough now that his voice carried through the microphone attached to his jumpsuit. "You want to prove who's the real man here? I got a proposition for you." "Bring it on," Mike slurred, clenching his fists. "Here's what we're going to do," Elvis said, his voice suddenly taking on that smooth, confident tone that had charmed millions of fans around the world. "We're going to have ourselves a singing contest. You and me, right here, right now. Winner takes all." The suggestion was so unexpected, so completely different from what anyone thought was going to happen, that it took several seconds for the crowd to process what they had just heard. A singing contest. This drunk heckler versus Elvis Presley in a singing contest on stage. Then someone in the audience started laughing. Then someone else joined in. Within seconds, the entire arena was filled with laughter and applause. The dangerous tension that had been building toward violence suddenly transformed into excitement for something completely different and unexpected. Big Mike, however, was not happy with this turn of events. "I don't want to sing with you. I want to fight you," he said, still aggressive. "Well, that's too bad," Elvis said, grinning now, "because this is my stage. These are my people, and we do things my way here. You want to prove you're tougher than me? Then prove you can do what I do. Sing." Elvis gestured to Charlie Hodge, his longtime friend and guitarist, who was watching this entire scene with his mouth hanging open in disbelief. "Charlie, give the man a microphone," Elvis said. "And boys," he called to his band, "let's give our new friend here a chance to show us what he's got." The band, still in shock but following Elvis's lead, prepared to play. Big Mike was handed a microphone and suddenly found himself the center of attention in a way he had never expected. He looked around the arena with a mixture of confusion and panic spreading across his face. "What? What do you want me to sing?" he asked, his aggressive tone now replaced with uncertainty and fear. "Whatever you want, friend," Elvis said generously. "This is your moment. 20,000 people are waiting to hear what you've got to say." What followed was both hilarious and strangely touching. Big Mike, clearly out of his element but trapped by his own big talk, attempted to sing "My Way," apparently the only song he could think of in his alcohol-fogged brain. His performance was predictably terrible. He was completely off-key, forgot half the words, and swayed so much that Charlie Hodge had to steady him to keep him from falling over. But here's the remarkable part that nobody expected. Instead of the audience booing or laughing at his terrible performance, something completely different happened. As Mike struggled through the song, clearly embarrassed and vulnerable, the crowd began cheering him on. "You got this," people shouted. "Keep going! Sing it, Mike!" Elvis, standing right beside him, began clapping along and encouraging him. When Mike forgot the words, Elvis would whisper them in his ear. When Mike started to give up, Elvis put his arm around his shoulders and kept him going. By the time Big Mike finished his stumbling version of "My Way," something had completely changed in the room. This angry, hostile drunk who had come to cause trouble had become, for a few precious minutes, just another person trying his best at something difficult. The audience gave him a standing ovation, not because he sang well, but because he tried, and because Elvis had created a space where even a hostile heckler could be transformed into someone worth cheering for. That was beautiful. "Mike," Elvis said, and he seemed to genuinely mean it. "That took real courage." Big Mike, now clearly emotional and no longer aggressive at all, looked around the arena in complete wonder. "I can't believe they're clapping for me," he said, his voice shaking. "Of course they are," Elvis replied warmly. You just did something brave. You got up here and tried something new in front of 20,000 people. That's more than most folks ever do in their entire lives. Now, Elvis said, grinning at the crowd, I suppose it's my turn. But instead of showing off with one of his biggest hits, instead of demonstrating the enormous difference in talent between himself and the heckler, Elvis did something that showed his true character. He chose to sing He's Got the Whole World in His Hands, a simple gospel song that invited audience participation. And he made sure that Big Mike sang along with him, giving him harmony parts and making him feel like a genuine part of the performance. The two men stood on stage, together, the king of rock and roll and a drunk construction worker from Phoenix, singing gospel music, while 20,000 people joined their voices together. When the song ended, Elvis turned to Big Mike with genuine warmth and concern. Mike, I want to ask you something, Elvis said. What made you so angry tonight? What's really bothering you? The question, asked with such sincere concern, seemed to break something open deep inside Big Mike. In front of 20,000 people, this tough construction worker started to cry. I lost my job last month, Mike said into the microphone, his voice shaking with emotion. My wife left me. I wanted someone to pay attention to me. I wanted to matter. The arena went completely silent. Elvis put his arm around Mike's shoulders like they were old friends. Brother, you matter, Elvis said firmly. You matter to me, and you matter to every single person in this room. We all have times when we feel lost and angry, but you don't have to tear other people down to build yourself up. What Elvis did next became the stuff of Vegas legend that people still talk about today. Ladies and gentlemen, Elvis said to the audience, I want to tell you about the real courage I've seen tonight. It wasn't Mike coming up here to cause trouble. It was Mike admitting when he was hurting and asking for help. That takes more guts than any fight ever could. Elvis then announced that he was personally going to help Mike find a job in Las Vegas. If anyone in the audience owned a construction company and needed a hard worker, they should talk to his people after the show, because that's what we do for each other, Elvis said. We help. We don't tear down, we build up. Big Mike stayed for the rest of the concert, sitting on the side of the stage, occasionally joining in on songs when Elvis invited him. By the end of the night, he had gone from being the show's biggest disruption to being part of its most memorable and meaningful moments. 3 construction company owners approached Elvis's management after the show with job offers for Mike. He chose one, moved to Las Vegas, and worked there for the next 15 years until his retirement. But more importantly, the story of what happened that night spread throughout Las Vegas and beyond, becoming a legendary example of how to handle conflict with grace, wisdom, and compassion. The incident reinforced Elvis's belief that his role as a performer was about much more than just entertainment. He realized he had a responsibility to make people's lives better, whether they were fans or hecklers. Elvis began incorporating more direct audience interaction into his shows, always looking for opportunities to connect with people who seemed to be struggling. Today, the story of Elvis and the heckler is taught in conflict resolution courses and cited by therapists as an example of how to de-escalate tense situations through empathy and understanding. Big Mike Henderson, before his death in 2003, gave several interviews about that night, always crediting Elvis with saving his life by showing him better ways to deal with pain than lashing out at others. This incredible confrontation reminds us that behind every act of aggression is usually a person in pain. It shows us that the strongest response to hostility isn't more hostility, it's understanding, compassion, and the willingness to see the humanity in everyone. Elvis could have had Mike thrown out, could have made jokes at his expense, could have used his power to humiliate him. Instead, he chose to help him, heal him, and show 20,000 people what real strength looks like. Hit subscribe to see more incredible moments when stars showed their true character under pressure.